Well, now we're going to move into the next session of succession planning for business owners. And this is an area that I've been working on myself personally, professionally for a number of years, going back into the 80s. So when I was a tax partner at Touche Ross and before the merger with Deloitte, we did a lot of work with business owners on succession planning. I was part of a group of partners that formed a seminar that we did in Arizona for financial planning for business owners. It was interesting that the firm had financial planning seminars, but they didn't have anything that really met the needs and the unique issues you have with a business owner. So it was an area that I focused on a number of years ago, and some of these materials they're in the handout are things that I developed back when I was working with business owners, several business owners in the 80s on their succession plan. The most I guess the most time I spent on one was probably with Charlie Squarey and Squarey Foods. That I worked with Charlie in 1986, putting together his succession plan with his 4 sons in the business. I worked with Charlie as his attorney and CPA for over 20 years before he passed away around 10 years ago. But when we were putting this plan together, we had 4 sons in the business. He wanted a succession plan. We put it in place. The interesting thing about that was that we really did see a change in the company when they became owners. So we actually gave them 49% of the company. We were able to do estate planning because we did it at the time before the business exploded. He had just gone through a divorce. We were able to value the company consistent with what had been valued the company for purposes of a divorce, as well as buying out a minority owner. So I was able to get half of the value of the business out of the company at no tax cost in 1986, no estate tax cost. And then, we worked in the company. It was when I left Deloitte after the merger, I went into the company firsthand and was his CFO for 2 years at Square Food Service. It was a $50 million company when I was there. By the time I left in 93, it was a $70 million company. And they became a $100 million company by 96 and sold out to a public company. So I went through that whole transition. It was very interesting, and to me, a family business is all about relationships and trying to build those relationships. And the issues that I had with not just Charlie and his company, but with most business owners, we're all the same. We're all human. We all have the same issues. And so when I'm working with Charlie in particular, we went in and we tried to figure out which of the 4 sons wanted to become president of the company. We found out that 2 of the 4 did and the other 2 didn't. And one guy was in charge of sales, the other guy was in charge of warehousing. And so I had to try to get them focused on their job instead of trying to convince Dad that they were better and they were the right choice to give control of the company to. That was what was going on too. They want control of the company, so they weren't not just trying to do a good job on their end, they were trying to stab their brother in the back, putting their brother back down, okay? And when I got them focused on, and one of my strategies here is, well, if you want to be president of the company, you should be identifying who's going to do your job when you become president, because you're in charge of all the sales of the company, and you're in charge of all the warehousing and operations of the company. Who's going to step into your shoes? If you're going to have a good succession plan, you just can't step out here and then you have this large company. Who's going to fill the void? So each of them really, it worked out great. They started working on with their job, okay? And whenever I had problems with them, I always had in the back of my mind, I always asked the question, what's in the best interest of the company? Because sometimes some of the issues were not really something that was in the best interest of the company, but they were trying to score points with Dad, okay? So, you get into the personal dynamics. I can tell you, I was Charlie's guy. I didn't go to lunch with him, okay? Charlie sold the company in 96, and I didn't hear anything from all 4 of them after 1996. I was Charlie's guy. I worked with Charlie from 96 to 2003 when he passed away. So that's okay. It's all about relationships. Charlie was like a dad to me, That's how, when you have clients that you become close to, you really care about your clients. That's what it's about. I've got the hands-on experience because when I started my practice after I left Square Foods, I had a 2-year covenant not to compete. I had a brother that was a CPA, and we became Hesch and Hesch 6 months after I left Square Food Service. So I was in business with my brother for 2.5 years. We are still brothers. Okay? I took my marbles and moved down the hall. That's where we are today. He moved out and I expanded in his space the last 20 years. So I've been in the family business with my brother, and I've had to deal with those issues personally. And I actually had a son that went to law school that ended up working in the business as a law clerk. Now, he didn't want to do what I did. He never did. He was going to be a litigator. I don't do litigation. I don't go in the courtroom. Okay? You might wonder, how do you do what I do? I'm a CPA, I'm an attorney, I'm a financial advisor, financial planner, and registered investment advisor, because I focus on certain things and I just focus on that niche. There's no way I could be, I feel, competent to go into the courtroom and do litigation. I just have a very narrow niche practice that I work with, and they complement each other. So I had my son in the business, but my son dropped out of law school. Now what are you going to do? Well, okay, he needs to get on his feet financially. So, okay, you got 1 year, I told him. Well, after a year, he's still there, you know. What are you going to do? And he started having some problems. I've had to go through that. So I fired him in January of 2008. I had to fire my son. It was 1.5 years of outpatient rehab. He's on his feet now, thank God. It was a blessing. And he's been with this company for 6 years that he landed with. It was a client of mine. And so, you know, he's on his feet. Okay? That's life. Everybody's got it. We see it in the estate planning arena. We're all human. Okay? But I think it is important, though, when you're doing succession planning in a family business to understand the dynamics, of the family business. I think that the Gehring Center is a good resource here in Cincinnati to provide education for family businesses on their succession plan. So I think that's a good resource, because I think when I talk about succession planning, they have different classes that help people deal with all the issues, and it's all about relationship. It isn't just. But there are issues about how do you do a business plan, but there's also an issue about how you develop the relationship between the family, because it's not unusual. And Charlie was a great example. He ran the whole company, and the whole company evolved around Charlie. His son in sales, and they all, it was the culture of a company. And the culture of a company develops over the years. Okay? I went as a CFO and met with we had accounts receivable, payable. I had 10 people I was managing administratively in the accounting department. And so I met with them and said, hey, I want to know how we can do a better job. What can we do better the next year? So I waited 30 days later. I got 0 response. Okay? So I said, next monthly meeting, I said, well, that didn't work. I'm going to meet individually with each one of you to see what ideas you have to make this company more successful. It was really interesting because it was almost a unanimous response. It says, we've been there, done that before, but nobody's ever done anything. Why bother? But it was really interesting because the accounts receivable people said, well, we do spend all morning copying all the checks, and then in the afternoon we enter it in the computer. I said, well, why are you copying the checks? You got $50 million in sales. Well, that's what we've always done. I said, well, what if we just got the checks in and put them in the computer? Oh, that'd be fine, We started doing that, and all of a sudden, they couldn't handle all the credit memos. It was in data processing because they didn't have enough time with the 2 workers in the accounts receivable. All of a sudden, they had time to take over all the credit memos, okay? And that was where it should be handled, inside the accounts receivable department. Accounts payable, it was great. They had 3 people there, 2 people and a part-time person who was getting ready to retire. And they thought they were going to need a 3rd person because we're just so busy and overloaded. I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, every morning we just copy all the invoices. Really? Yeah, we copy them. And then in the afternoon we enter them in the computer. I said, well, what if you just got the invoice in and entered it into the computer when you got it? Yeah, that would work, Because most of the time it's just for one item, or one account. Sometimes you have multiple accounts. So they started not copying the invoices, and guess what? They were freed up. When the lady retired, we didn't have to hire anybody. So we're talking about culture. We're talking about systems and processes. And in a family business, you have that. And I learned this a long time ago in Life Success. I went to Life Success around 14 years ago. I use that every day. There's a few things that I just think about subconsciously all the time. And the one thing I learned was that if you look at your intentions, those are your results. So everybody's out there saying, well, everybody's got excuses. Everybody's a victim. No. Because the next day at Life Success in the basic summary, they talk about if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. I use that every day in my life, personally and professionally. If I want different things in my life, if I want something better, then we have to do things differently. You got to be open to change. Oh my gosh. Change is inevitable. Successful companies are the ones that can adapt to change. And then the third thing, Saturday night at the basic program, Life Success, I learned that your success in life, both professionally and personally, are totally proportionate to the commitments you make and keep. I found 14 years ago I was overcommitted. Most people are. You're overcommitted, and who suffers? Your loved ones, your family, your spouse, your children. You're overcommitted. So you got to learn to say no. I've been trying to simplify my life for the past 14 years. I still try to do that every day. Because then I have time to do the things that are most important to me. So that's a little testimony about Life Success, but it really has been a big part of those little things. I'll mention one thing that I did in my practice the first year after Life Success. We would do the tax returns during the week, and on Saturday we would stack them all up, and we would come in on Saturday and process the returns on Saturday. I said, what if, part of the problem was Bill, because they would stack up on my desk, and by Thursday or Friday, then I would get them off my desk, and then we would process them on Friday. I said, what if I implemented the 24-hour rule? Everything goes on my desk, I handle within 24 hours, and every tax return. It was really interesting because then if I had a question for Carrie and Scott and Kathy at the time, it would have been, they would remember what happened yesterday, but they're not going to what happened 3 days ago. So it was easier to do the tax returns, and then the person processing the returns processed them during the week, and that tax season, guess what? We didn't have to come in on Saturdays. Amazing. We were more efficient. We did more work in less time. And I was the problem. They were stacking up on my desk. Okay? And business owners have a lot of culture, a lot of things that they've always done. And the thing you got a lot of times in succession planning, one of the big barriers for successful succession plan is the inability to accept the change that's going on. So as the owner tries to shift responsibilities, the people working around them, if they don't like the answer they're getting, they go around the person that's been put in charge, go back to the owner, and they just cut the legs off of the new president of the company. And new owner, everybody's found out how to manipulate and get what they want inside the company. Protect their job, protect whatever they like doing, and this and that. So I'm just trying to share with you, I had a lot of really good hands-on experience, both personally, I'm an entrepreneur, my business, and I think that's another thing I'll share with you too. In 2008, when the recession hit, I'm a tax guy. I had home builders out of business. All my contractors out of business. I lost business, right? Recession hit. I mean, seriously. And then the people that were in business, they said, Bill, we're barely surviving. I've just had two companies in the last 6 months finally go bankrupt. One a contractor and one a retail shop within the past year. They were trying to survive that recession, could never get over the hump. So I felt very fortunate that we started marketing. Guess what? I do enjoy marketing, and we've been doing a lot of that. And we've been focused on the marketing, Amy and I, and that was back in 2009 when the recession hit. And we were very fortunate because I knew that I could maybe grow the law firm, and the law firm could get clients that feeds the CPA practice, and the law firm could grow. And that was my vision. And I also said to myself, what do I want to be doing in the next 20 years? I want to build the law firm up. So we were recognized in 2011 and 2012 by the chamber as the fastest growing businesses, the emerging 30, they call it here at the Northern Kentucky Chamber, that we doubled our law firm practice in the recession. from 2009 to 2011 and 12, and we continue to grow it. And so, and that's the thing I know, being a business owner, really a small business owner, it's all about sales and marketing with your business. That's the key. You can manage typically the other items, the production. Professionally, I can hire Kurt. He's been with me 2 years. I can hire an attorney and handle the growth. I can hire people. Sometimes you can't throw people at problems. You got to do them right. But I know from personal experience that the sales is what's driven my practice for the past 21 years. I was very lucky. I feel very blessed. When I started my practice, my story was I started my apartment in May of 1993. And 6 months later, I was with my brother. I needed to build $10,000 a month beginning in June. And God took care of me, and I billed $10,000 a month every month that year. I doubled my practice in 3 years. I doubled it in 3 years. I doubled it in 4 years. I grew my practice over the first 10 years. So I knew that sales and marketing was what it was all about, but I feel that it's a matter of God's taking care of me, but I got to do my job. And that's what it's about. For any small business, I got to say, from the first day I started my practice, I look in the mirror every day and say, fear is a great motivator. That fear never leaves you when you're a business owner. That fear never leaves you. And it's got to either motivate you or else it just takes you down. So there's always risk involved in being a business owner. And a succession plan is a very risky thing. It's scary. There's a lot of uncertainties. But what do? And that's the thing I look at. Business owners really might not, and I think one element of it, I think of it too, is that I see a lot of businesses out there that they don't have a succession plan in place if they get in a car accident. That happened a month ago. I hit a deer. It hit the right side of my car. I've been thinking about this for the past month. If I had been 2 seconds either, earlier or later, whatever it was, I would have hit it head on. It would have been on top of me. I was going 60 miles an hour on 275. Totaled my car. Okay. So, life, I just think about that, It's about the small things, and just, we could be in the wrong place at the wrong time and we're in a car accident. We get a DUI driver that hits us broadside. I've been following Kevin Murphy. He's got all kinds of problems. He got hit by a DUI driver. Neck problems. It happens to people. Real life. It happens in real life all the time. So as a business owner, what do you have in place? I have an LLC. That's why I set up an LLC, because of the continuity management that said if anything happened to me, that Amy's going to run the law firm, and I got Kathy now running the CPA firm. Okay? Because what's going to happen? Somebody's got to run something, right? And usually disability is only 6 months or a year. It's not 2 years maybe. But you never know what's going to happen. If I die, then, what's going to happen then? So I think that as a business owner, the one thing that a lot of businesses really fail to take into consideration, it's not the long-term problem, it's a potential short-term problem, is if something happened to the business owner, who's going to run your company? You have the organizational structure in place to do that. Do you have a power of attorney that would handle, that the power of attorney authorizes the person to run your business? If you have a corporation or an LLC, do you have an operating agreement or something that has officers in place or successor managers in place that I'm manager managed on my LLC so that the managers take over my practice and run the practice? Do you have the operating agreement in place? And then, you at least have to have that so they know what's going on. And I'm the plumber. I haven't really sat down with Kathy or even Amy and told them because it's not going to happen, right? So I haven't worried about, I got the structure in place, but they don't know everything I do in a way, but there's things I still have to do, believe me. Okay. So that's just kind of an overview, I think, of when I look at succession planning and what my experiences have been, that I've really observed a lot of different issues and really have worked with other businesses as well as myself. And I guess one thing that I'll focus on within the handout on succession plan, that there's an article I wrote back in 1990 that outlines what I do with family businesses, that ties in with my handout. And as a business owner, I think that communication is the key. It's all about communication. And you need to identify, if you have family members in the business, where they're going to be. And then you can worry about the key management, because you don't go to the key management first, because you really have to really deal with your family first. They never go away. Okay? So I talk about the process. And I think that in the end, one of the things I think is kind of unique that I try to do is, once you have identified, if you have people in place that you would like to start running your business, then I think it's highly recommended that you have that person step up and start working with you. And I talk about what I usually recommend. Well, let's talk about the business for next year. What are we going to do better? What are we going to do next year? And you try to test the waters. If you have a successor in line, you kind of, give them an opportunity, because they're going to make mistakes, because you've been doing it for how many years, and you knew the mistakes you've made. So it's a matter of sometimes it's really hard for a business owner to give up the mothership. And they hold their cards to their vest, and they're not going to let anybody know what's really going on. And that's just typical. I had that with Charlie, and his 4 sons, And that's okay. I've seen it with so many family businesses, and that's the norm. And really, Brad and I go back into the 80s, that we did some work with his dad and his brother and family, and did a lot of estate planning work and a lot of succession work, and it's a process. It's a long-term process. It doesn't happen overnight. This is something. Okay, I did my succession plan. It's over. No. Yeah, you're talking about 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It could be for the rest of your life. The business owner. I've seen business owners that they're going to continue working, and why not? You know why? Why do business owners that are financially successful still stay in business? It's the game. It's the game of life. I can tell you, Charlie, he sold his company for a lot of money. Half of it didn't pay estate taxes on, too, by the way, because of the planning we did 10 years before it was sold. But Charlie sold the company and had a consulting agreement for 3 years. He sat in the office and he didn't get one phone call for 3 years. The people were his family. They had a merger in Cincinnati, and they started terminating the people in his company, and he saw them walking out the door, losing their jobs. The people that left ended up eventually starting Queensgate Food Service, where he started back down in Dalton Street. And so it's family, and he was devastated by it. He says the worst thing he ever did was sell his company. He had all that money. It does bring happiness. I'd also studied when I was studying financial planning with Tush Ross, that when someone retires, when they really retire, the average life expectancy is 6 years. Why does that happen? I've studied that too. You have to have a purpose in life. It's the game of life. And for Charlie, it killed him. He died in 2003. And, I kind of tease with Amy, I'm going to be around for another 20 years. Part of it is, as long as I'm healthy and happy and everything else, I wouldn't. But, my point is that that's what keeps you going. It really does. It's the game. It's the relationships you have. It's the problem solving you have. It's the high you get. You get the lows, but you know what? You're used to that. That's right. You take the good and bad in business. Business, I always say there's going to be problems. I just don't know where they're going to come from. And I got to be prepared for it. So, I really work with clients on succession planning I counsel clients that, I think one example I always thought was funny was Cliff Kors with Northside Bank retired 3 or 4 times, and he was still working in his 80s because he went down to Florida and he got bored. Charlie got bored. What are you going to do? And that's the thing, the key that I will say, if you do retire and you do go, you don't have to give up on life 6 years later. You need to have a new purpose in life. You need a life purpose. That's what keeps you living, is your life purpose. Okay? So there's a lot of good things you could do out in the community with family and friends, other businesses, whatever it is. But it's really important. I counsel business owners that are going through a succession plan and they're going to retire. I try to encourage them to really identify what's next. I always loved George Burns. When he turned 90, he planned his 100th birthday party. And he lived to be 106 months old. He had his 100th birthday party. That's what it's about. And that's what I find with clients. It's not about the money. The money's important. Yeah, so but I got to say, and I read these things on about when people are on their deathbed. What do they really reflect on? What do they wish they would have done more of? So it is about the relationships, and that's what I try to work on with my clients. That they try to work with, when you have family members in a business. There's a transition that goes in place, and if you turn to the outline on the third page, it really summarizes an overall strategy that I use in putting the business plan together. So we identify where do we want the company to be in the next 5 to 10 years. Are we on the same page? It's on page 3 of the succession planning outline. And then, we look at the current organizational chart, who are the key people. We determine where the key people will be in the next 5 to 10 years. It is that simple then. And then you identify weaknesses. Okay, where are we weak? We got to be honest with each other. What do we need to do? What are the job descriptions, career paths, maybe evaluations, or how are we going to measure current and future management? That's the whole thing that it's important to work with each person if they're whatever their role is in the company currently, and it gets back to John and Joe, or and Chuck, all the squirry guys that we had to identify where do they want to be in 3 to 5 years. So Chuck was in charge of sales, but he wanted to be president, and he was going to have Joe come in. Okay, and then John was in charge of operations. He had his warehouse guy he was developing. So it's a process. It's a long-term process, and I think the thing that I encourage clients to do is test the waters. Why wait? Okay, so why wait to do something in 3, 5, or 10 years? Start doing it now. If they're in place. Okay, if the person is in place, it's different. One other strategy might be that you say, well, I'm not going to. There's nobody in place, so if something happens, I need to have someone in control to either merge the company with a competitor or hire somebody in to run the company. That could be a strategy. That we're not going to develop the person internally. Sometimes businesses are so small you can't really duplicate the people, the personnel. So when you're really small, it's just a matter of having your ducks in a row, and then whoever has the power of attorney or whoever's in control of the company, if something happens upon a death or disability, that person has marching orders that they know what they want to do. From that standpoint. On page 5, it talks about, it's just simple. I just have a form I give clients, and we have a person say, identify your current position in the company, where you are, and where you want to be. Okay, it starts a dialogue. I had one client that she had put together an incentive stock option plan, which was really not a succession plan. It's a compensation plan. Incentive stock said, key people in 10 years are going to get this money. It's just a bonus. And when I talked to the people the person she thought wanted to be president, the person didn't want to become president of the company. They hadn't communicated. Okay, but the attorney's already put the plan in place. And then she finds out, if she puts the incentive compensation plan in place, that, oh, by the way, I thought you'd like to be president of the company. No, I don't want to be president of the company. She goes down to the other 3 or 4 key people, and she realizes that she doesn't have a management team in place. That in her solution then would be to merge the company or sell the company down the road, because the people in place did not want to take over running the company. It's all about communication. That's what these outlines, just these asking the right question is what I call it, And then we try to identify, because when you have a larger company, like, if you have 50, 100 employees, you have differences of opinion of who thinks a person is a key employee and not. Some people like this person, but other people don't like that person. Okay, so you try to build consensus is what I try to do as to the key people and whether or not the key person, what would happen if that person died? If they're key, then what happens if they die or become disabled? Then what do we need to provide plan B? And it may be that you try to develop somebody to take over the responsibilities if you're big enough. If not, you got a plan that you just go out and try to hire somebody real quick if something happened. That's why we have key man insurance for a business on a key person. That we have key man insurance so that if something happens, the company has life insurance to carry through the transition of replacing that key person. That's what key man insurance is about. Separate and apart from buyout insurance. If somebody's trying to have insurance to buy out the company. Okay? And then we also look at the organizational chart and we try to identify whether there's consensus within, particularly more family members you have in a business, you try to build consensus because, and the other thing I think too is there's different ways of trying to structure it, and that's something that we try to look at as far as, okay, if something happened, who's going to be in charge and who's going to take over which responsibilities within a company. And I think that from that standpoint, I look at whether or not, if certain people have been identified to take over, then we got to raise the question, are they going to be buying the stock of the company, whatever, the ownership interest of the company? Who's going to buy it? What are they going to use to pay for it? And so that becomes a unique problem too, as far as a lot of times the business is the financial security of the owner. Most clients have everything they got in the business. So when you try to identify what's going to happen, it's very difficult to do a management buyout sometimes because typically the management team may not have the financial resources to buy out the company, and it's more difficult to get financing today with a bank on a leveraged buyout. Those deals are gone. That was 25 years ago we did leveraged buyouts. Banks don't do that anymore with new banking regulations. So a lot of times we'll set up I did this once actually went down around 15 years ago to a company in Louisiana. He had two key people. It was an engineering company, and they had two owners, and they had 9 key people. Went down there, we set up a succession plan, and basically we had a valuation question, and then they were going to buy it over a period of 10 years. And so what we did was that we basically said, the price of the business will continue to increase because it was a growing company until the new buyers take more than 50% of the ownership and have paid for more than 50%. So that was how we did a transition where they would buy in over 10 years. They were using the profits of the company, their share of the profits of the company, to take that money to pay the owners. Okay, they were taking over responsibilities of managing the company. We were making a transition there. They had two key people. They had a 9-person management team taking over this consulting company that was growing down in Louisiana. So there's some strategies that have to be involved when you're trying to do a succession plan as to whether or not you're going to have a management buyout or whether or not you're going to try to sell the company on the market on the outside. It was kind of interesting in the Scory situation that the company had grown to $100 million in sales, and they had outgrown the warehouse already, so they were going to need to do another expansion. And Charlie's approach to hold his sons accountable he says, guys, you guys are going to sign off on the next deal. I'm not. That always gets everybody's attention when they have to sign off on the next deal. They all looked around and said, well, maybe we should sell this company. And it was unanimous that they sold the company, okay? Because sometimes you look at the risks that's involved, and it's like, okay, they were a $100 million company bought by $1 billion company. It's just a public company out there that was growing and putting this structure in place, JP Food Service and then U.S. Food Service. So, there are some other, I think, important issues that you have. Once you get your team in place, then that we got a question of, okay, if the management is going to buy out the stock, then how are we going to value the company? What's it worth? And how's he going to get paid? What kind of security does the owner have? Because the owner has to, that's their retirement plan for a lot of businesses. The business is their retirement plan. They've put everything they got into the business to grow the business over the years. Any questions on anything?
I'm an independent contractor and I work under a big umbrella broker. And I know a couple of the girls in my office have put their business in LLCs. Do you think that is a wise thing with the line of work that I do?
Well, and again, what they may be trying to do is set up an LLC that they can make an S election for. They like to be taxed as an S corporation. There's two main reasons for setting up an LLC. One would be liability protection. But as a real estate broker, as an attorney, a doctor, if you're providing professional services, you're liable for your personal acts. You can't hide behind a corporation. So to me, there's no asset protection, any liability protection by being inside an LLC. Now, that does provide some protection if you have other people working for you, and if they're liable, then it insulates you, because that's the same thing if you have a doctor group, that the doctor is not personally liable in a corporation or an LLC for the acts of the other owners in which he had no involvement with that case. So I think that would be the one issue potentially but typically the liability is not that significant like a doctor for a real estate broker, so I'm not that concerned about it.
Well, maybe it's just, when I think about it, it's ones that have teams and stuff, so that would make sense for that.
They do have some liability protection. It's a firewall, because then they got to show that they weren't involved in the transaction at all. I'm involved in every client, so I don't know if that person is involved with each.
Well, the buck stops at that person now.
Yeah. Well, but they got to show that they were not negligent. They were not involved. They may, from that standpoint. The other thing is the S corporation. I would mention that a lot of people are out there saying, "Oh, you should be an S corp." But really, the point about that is you only want to be an S corp if you have earnings in excess of a reasonable salary for you. So I have a lot of businesses that are small businesses that the money that they generate they just have a job. In other words, and the IRS takes the position for attorneys and CPAs that if you're by yourself, then whatever you make should be your compensation. Okay? If you have other people working for you, then you make money on other people, then you can potentially defer some of the profits. Actually, Carrie and I just went through that analysis for myself, because the point is that really, if you can, ideally, if your compensation is under $100,000, your total profits of the company, if you can justify paying yourself a $50,000 salary, then you're going to be an S corporation, and only $50,000 is subject to payroll taxes. The other $50,000 avoids payroll taxes at 15%. That person saves $7,500 in Social Security taxes. In today's market, I recommend they put that money into an IRA or something, because the point I would make there is that if you are reducing, if you're trying to save Social Security taxes, you're going to get a Social Security benefit based upon $50,000, not $100,000. Okay. Now people say, well, I'm not going to get anything, so what does it matter whether it's 100 or 50? Or I would rather take my money and invest it, and I'll be better off with whatever I would lose. I'll probably be better off having money in my IRA. Yes?
So when you were talking about kind of that family business and so many children involved, so you've got the husband and the wife that are the owners, but they're in their mid-70s because they can't let go of the business. Mm-hmm. And have total confidence that they're going to pass it on to the kids, but the kids are involved.
Right.
Their attorney was recently advising them, put the business and personal property in a trust. But their concern is they can't pass that on and have a step up in cost basis when the second one of them are to die if they put it into a trust. I don't understand all the complexities involved in that, so I'm not advising them. I'm trying to put it back to their CPA. But
yeah, we do use a trust in the succession of a business. What you're talking about is whether or not, and the way I would look at it is this: if they're not going to sell the company ever, and they're just going to inherit it from one generation to another, it doesn't matter what the basis is because you're always gifting it, you're always inheriting it. Sometimes people miss the simple thing in the equation. So if you had a family business that the intention is not to sell it, then I don't worry about losing basis because I had put it into a trust. We have a client that actually, a small business, we put the assets into a trust and gifted the stock to the children that were active in the business, okay? Because they were concerned about Medicaid. They were in their 70s. And the fact that the only thing they had was the business and their house, and that if something happened to them, that the business would be strapped with having to be sold or the income be used to pay for the nursing home. So doing some advanced planning for Medicaid purposes, we put we gifted the business to the kids. They were more than happy with that. They kept the real estate that they rented to the business, so they kept their income flow, and they work in the business so they can keep the income there. But they wanted to really, insulate the business from Medicaid, nursing home. Another situation I have is a larger company, 50 employees, and he's got key people, and he doesn't want his children, they're not active, well, one is in the business, but not going to be a successor. He's already determined that, okay? He's got key people in the business, he put it into a trust. So we've been working on this estate plan for 3 years, getting everything put together. The interesting thing here is that we put the business goes into the trust, so upon his death, he's identified a separate trust that holds the children's trust, holds the company stock and the real estate, okay, for the benefit of his children. The trustees are the key people. And they make all the decisions whether to sell it, merge it, or continue to operate it, okay? So that's another example where we try to use a trust in that situation. You can use a trust. One of the benefits of using the trust is you're trying to control what happens, so you got things in place. My point is they don't have to fund the trust now. They can have an estate plan that says when they die, this is how it's going to be held. It'll be held in trust. And that's one thing that you do to keep it. That's another issue you got, a benefit of a trust, is that the stock, if you give the stock to the kids outright, then if they die, it may go to the in-laws. And most clients do not want the son or daughter-in-law to inherit any part of the business. So you have the trust set up, so everything goes in trust to the benefit of the son or daughter, sons that they have, their children. And upon their death, it goes to their grandchildren in trust. So it stays in trust for the lifetime. So there's no question of the succession of the business. It stays in the family.
The sense of urgency of closing an estate is removed since the trust is now the owner, not the 74 or 5-year-old that could pass away, and so but the trust lives on.
Yeah, but I'd like the trust. I'm trying to say that well, if you don't do the trust, they inherit the property directly. Okay, so that's the difference, and there's some benefits that it's simpler, it's less costly. You have an estate plan. When I die, it goes to my children equally. Well, then they own it. Then you can control in the trust though. Voting control, who's running the voting control is done by the trustee, not by the individual beneficiaries of the trust. Okay, so to me, it facilitates the management of the company. It depends on the dynamics of the family, but it's hard. You don't want to have management by committee. You don't want to have 4 children own the business, and then that's what I had with Charlie. Has 4 sons, so 3 or 4 were going to be making decisions on the company, and that was a disaster. And he knew that. Okay, so that's why we use a trust in that regard too, that it really simplifies the ongoing management of the company because you have one trustee voting all the stock. And in our case, the trustee was not even the children. Okay, it was the key people in the company. And then we had a bank as a last resort. So I'll do that. So in this particular case, the children would not even have any control over the company at all. But it was going to be run by the key people, and then the bank would make the decision whether to run the company or sell the company. I should mention estate taxes. That's not usually a consideration now for most businesses because the Kentucky, if you leave the property to your children, there's no estate tax and your heirs. direct line. Now, if you have friends, family, that are distant, then you would have a Kentucky inheritance tax. Ohio repealed the estate tax completely. Federally, it's $5,340,000. That's in the back of my tax guide. So we don't have to worry typically with most clients about estate taxes, but the client Amy and I were meeting with a couple days ago, we were able to determine that he's right at the bubble. He's right at the $5 million threshold. So we did talk to him about, he was planning maybe to sell the company down the road, that I had to tell him, by the way, this is interesting. His eyes got really big. If you sell the company for an extra $2 million, 40% of it's going to go to the government, who may need to do some planning. So he's interested in follow-up and doing some planning in January. What can we do to do some strategies to keep him from having to pay estate taxes? Because that's what the estate tax rate is if you go over that $5.3 million, 40%. It's like, whoa, okay. And we had a simple solution for him too. He had real estate worth $600,000. I want to put it into an LLC. I want to gift that to the kids. I can get that $600,000 out of his estate over the next 4 years, with the number of children he's got, and they can pay rent the company to that LLC. So that'll keep he'll be building money out of his estate in this LLC that they'll get rent, and he can. I also told him he can control it. He can have 100% control of the LLC, but the kids can own 98% of it. So he can have control of the real estate, but he can also shift the wealth to his kids and get it out of his estate. When you're talking about saving 40%, it's significant. And the rent that they're paying on the building over a period of 10 years would be another $400,000. So he's getting $1 million out of his estate, basically. Simple strategy. And the cash flow from the real estate isn't going to affect his income at all. So we can do some really simple things, simple solutions. I use real estate a lot in doing the estate planning from that standpoint. Okay. Any other questions? Well, thanks for, giving me some good questions here. And Amy and I will be back with estate planning in around 10 minutes then, okay? Thank you.